the land on which we meet, and pay my respect to elders past and present, and I extend that to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here today. Do-it-yourself treasure hunting is a big deal in the United Kingdom at the moment. Many hobbyists use metal detectors, such as in the fictional activities of the Damery Metal Detecting Club in the in the TV comedy The Detectorists. So this is, as we will see, actually becoming a significant way of finding new artefacts in English history. Another popular pastime is mudlarking on the Thames and other UK rivers in search of artefacts and treasures in history. In this course, we look at some of the significant finds made, the clubs and associations, and the rules, regulations and debates arising around this area of interest. So we're going to cover archaeology in the United Kingdom, just the different periods of archaeological search, famous finds by amateurs, including the famous find at Sutton Hoo of 1939, the arrival of the metal detector, and then we're also going to look at metal detecting today, the history of mudlarking, searching for valuables by the river, some books and TV documentaries about mudlarking, some of the trends and debates in both metal detecting and mudlarking. In particular, are these two pastimes in danger of being loved to death? Mudlarking has become such a big event that it's actually, there's a exhibition at the London Museum or Museum of London, and I'm just going to run a video about that now.
Twice a day, the foreshore reveals its secrets as the tide is pulled back by the power of the moon. Secrets of the Thames invites visitors to follow in the footsteps of mudlarks and search our recreated foreshore to discover stories of love, faith, journeys, life and death. These are the fragments of everyday lives stretching back over thousands of years, belongings dropped, lost or given to the river where they have lain until the mudlarks brought them back into the light of the day. Mudlarking is a very special London activity, from the early mudlarks scavenging for scraps to sell, through to the modern mudlarks who have very different motivations and who are searching for fragments of London's past. The city has grown up on the banks of the Thames. The river has been a provider, highway and rubbish bin. All aspects of life can be found preserved in its mud, from leather shoes to Roman gemstones and iron swords. Mudlarks talk about the peace as their attention is held by their careful search. The stresses of modern day fade away as they connect with the ever-flowing river and their place in London's long history.
So in terms of archaeology in general, I just wanted to do a quick introduction. No doubt there have always been people who have been interested in the material remains of the past, but archaeology as a discipline had its earliest origins in the 15th and 16th century Europe, when Renaissance humanists looked back upon the glories of Greece and Rome and began to collect antiquities and to even sponsor excavations to find more works of ancient art. These were imitated by others in Northern Europe, and there was an antique culture that developed. But it was still not a sort of a science or archaeology in the strict sense. It was more like art collecting, you might say. Archaeology proper began with an interest in Greeks and Romans, which developed in the 18th century, and particularly with excavations at Pompeii and Herculaneum. Classical archaeology was established, and there was more of a system developed and particular protocols and methodologies given more of a scientific base by the work of Heinrich Schliemann, spelt Schliemann, who investigated the origins of Greek civilization at Troy and Mycenae in the 1870s. So, and then it didn't look back from then. And then we saw Arthur Evans, the Englishman, who began work at Knossos in Crete in 1900 to discover the Minoan civilization. And there was a lot more, of course, to that history, but that's just to give you a bit of a brief overview. Archaeology in the United Kingdom, there are some key periods: Neolithics or Stone Age from about 4000 to 2200 BC, which saw the introduction of farming, settled communities, pottery and monument building. The Bronze Age from about 2500 to 800 BC, the use of metal tools, cremation burials and the construction of massive henge monuments and round barrows. The Iron Age, from about 800 BC to AD 43, the development of hill forts, tribal societies and advanced iron technology. So just in the illustrations there at the top you can see a recreation of a fortress called Maiden Castle, one of the largest Iron Age hill forts in Britain. It is in Dorset to the south of England. Historians believe it was built almost 3,000 years ago. So this is based on archaeological finds and just a reimagining what that fort would have looked like. We then moved on to the historic period, AD 43 to the present, particularly with the arrivals of the Romans, characterised by urban planning, stone villas, roads and written records. Then we had early medieval and Anglo-Saxon archaeology from 410 to 1066. Period following Roman withdrawal featuring Saxon, Anglo and Jute settlements and the rise of different kingdoms. And then the medieval period up to 1540 defined by Norman castles, Gothic cathedrals and feudal society, extending through to the Tudor era. I've just included a link to the BBC document about a find, a mysterious Roman artefact, which we can see here, that was found during an amateur archaeological dig in Lincolnshire. It's a dodecahedron. Hope I pronounced that right. It's one of only 33 found in Britain. It was found in Norton Disney near Lincoln in the summer of 2023. So they're not 100% sure what the Romans used these for, possibly to support candles or lighting or possibly for some religious purpose, but they're a very engaging sort of 12-sided object. And there you can see a group of the people all in their high-vis vests who were involved in the discovery. We move on to post-medieval, early modern archaeology, which includes Tudor, Stuart and Georgian periods, and then 20th century modern archaeology focusing particularly on industrialised landscapes, although that really extends back into the 18th and 19th century. So there you can see industrial archaeology includes the remains of sites from the Industrial Revolution. The Iron Bridge, you can see there in Shropshire, was one of the first, is an example of modern engineering and the use of steel. Shropshire was one of the first areas in the world to be part of a large-scale industrial archaeology study. And then also you can see some Tudor coins, and these have an interesting past, which I'll talk about in a moment. They were found in a garden by some people doing some gardening during COVID. So a bit more about that find. I think this is from The Guardian. I'm sorry I didn't include the reference there. But these people found a New Forest family dug up 63 gold coins and one silver coin dating from the 15th and 16th century. They were turning up the soil in a flower bed and all of a sudden these coins popped out of the ground. Probably hidden in about 1540. They include coins from Henry VIII's reign, which are unusual that they also separately feature the initials of three of his wives, Catherine of Aragon, Anne Boleyn, and Jane Seymour. So whoever buried the coins was well off because they were valued about £24 at the time, which is about £14,000 today. So it's a mystery as to how they arrived in that particular spot. Just by way of context, I also want to just talk quickly about some of the most significant archaeological finds in England, and these were not necessarily found by metal detectorists or amateurs, but they are important to England. Just to give you a bit of an idea, Sutton Hoo was found by amateurs, discovered in 1939. We'll be talking about Sutton Hoo in a bit more detail. An Anglo-Saxon ship burial, considered to be one of the most magnificent archaeological finds in Europe. It contained the wealth of treasures, including the iconic Sutton Hoo helmet. The Mary Rose of Portsmouth, which you can see there at the Maritime Museum in Portsmouth in the image, was raised from the seabed in 1982. This was Henry VIII's flagship, which sunk in 1545. And they've managed to reconstruct large sections of the hull and brought up a lot of artefacts from that ship as well. Also, the Roman Vindolanda tablets from Northumberland, discovered near Hadrian's Wall. These thin wooden tablets are the oldest surviving handwritten documents in Britain. They provide an intimate, personal and gritty view of life on the Roman frontier, covering everything from military reports to birthday party invitations. The Staffordshire hoard, which we will talk about a bit later, was uncovered by Detectorists, and the largest hoard of Anglo-Saxon gold and silver ever found, with over 3,500 items. Richard III's grave at Leicester was a significant discovery. The 2012 discovery of King Richard III remains under a city council car park and was a watershed moment in British archaeology. So that's another one that is of great significance. Some other significant finds, just quickly. Seahenge, as it's called, Norfolk, a 4,000-year-old Bronze Age timber circle. You can see a recreation in the image of what this village would have looked like. And some other ones, Mustfarn, Cambridgeshire, a remarkably preserved Bronze Age settlement, often called Pompeii of the Fens. The Red Lady of Pavilant, Wales, the oldest human remains found in Britain, approximately 33,000 years old. The Alfred Jewel, I might have talked about recently in another course on museums of Oxford and London. The Alfred Jewel was found by a labourer in the 16th century working in a farm, and it was given to, eventually arrived at the Ashmolean Museum. It was some sort of a jewel recognising an official, and it was from the time of King Alfred. So Sutton Hoo, amateur archaeologist Basil Brown famously made the discovery of a lifetime back in 1939 when he brushed away the Suffolk soil and revealed the richest intact early medieval grave in Europe. More than a grave, it was a spectacular funerary monument on an epic scale, 27 metre or 88.6 feet. So he was encouraged, or basically he was engaged by Edith Pretty, who was a landowner, to work on this site. And he did an excellent job before the archaeologists from Cambridge arrived, and together they worked on unearthing fine feasting vessels, deluxe hanging bowls, silverware from distant Byzantium, and gold dress accessories with Sri Lanka garnets, which I find quite amazing. So this is a picture of the find of Sutton Hoo, and you can see the outline of the ship, which Basil worked very hard to recreate. It was just on the eve of World War II, but it was still a very significant find at the time, which made national and international headlines. There was a film made about the part of the tools of amateur archaeologists. They work by emitting an electromagnetic field from a search coil into the ground, which basically starts to beep. The long and short of it is it starts to beep when it finds a metal object. You know, it can be, I think, down to about 15 centimetres, maybe a little bit further under the ground. And so it was first invented by Alexander Graham Bell, but it then went on to be sort of further developed after that. And there were a number of different stages, as you can see there in that slide, in terms of the development. But the modern ones are quite lightweight, very sophisticated, and not that expensive in relative terms, I think. So a big find by Detectorists was the Staffordshire Hoard by Terry Herbert, a member of the Bloxwich Research and Metal Detective Club, on 2009 on the lands owned by Fred Johnson in Staffordshire with a metal detector. Once it was discovered, it was reported to the authorities, and over the next 5 days, 244 gold objects were recovered from the soil. And so the landowner granted permission for an archaeological excavation to search for the rest of the hoard. So it was likely buried in a field near Hammerwich. I don't know that the location has ever been publicly released, but this is someone who's obviously done a bit of investigation and worked out where it might have been. It was a collection of war trophies, primarily sword fittings, stripped from defeated enemies and buried by Mercian warriors, potentially as a ritual offering, a hastily hidden treasure. But what is the law in relation to these finds, some of which are very valuable indeed? Under the Treasure Act of 1996, an object is legally treasure in England, Wales and Northern Ireland if it meets the following criteria. Metallic objects, non-coin, at least 300 years old and containing at least 10% precious metal, gold or silver. Any prehistoric metal, coins, 2 or more coins from the same find that are at least 300 years old, and a new rule called significant finds, any metal object at least 200 years old that provides exceptional insight into history or culture, regardless of its material. So you're legally required to report a treasure find within 14 days of discovery, and you report it to a local finds liaison officer. There are quite strict penalties for non-compliance. And they sort of basically, they do get, if these get sold to a museum, then I think the detectorist and the landowner get a share of the sale, and that's split 50-50 normally. Detectorists in the UK do not need a licence, but they have to be very careful about seeking permission over land. Another major find was this one by a detectorist who found this pendant from Henry VIII. And this is having a significant impact. The British Museum in 2024 or 2025 announced the latest annual figures for the Portable Antiquities Scheme, revealing a third consecutive record-breaking year for reported finds and treasure cases. And you can see just from reading that slide, there's some significant number of finds. And the detectorists account for 94% of recorded finds. I suppose this reflects in a way on the sometimes turbulent history of Britain, you know, with the Romans arriving and then departing, and then the Anglo-Saxons and some of the local wars between the different large groups, the Vikings, of course, and the subsequent waves of attacks. And it's probably inevitable that sometimes these treasures were hidden, and then even on from there. There's also just the fact that they were sometimes, coins were tossed or lost or whatever. But it reflects on the many layers that exist in the United Kingdom in terms of its history. So there's just a bit more detail about the finds that has been reported. And there have been some significant discoveries, such as just in recent years, a hoard of 179 silver pennies, likely buried on the eve of battle in 1066, is one major example. Here's a gentleman who's been detectoring for a long time, and I think he's probably reflects a really good outcome for a detectorist and for the community, where his find led to a major archaeological excavation that uncovered not just a few items, but a whole picture of a life on this particular Roman estate after the Romans had left. So this is this gentleman pictured at the age of 90. His name was Dave Darby, and he started detectoring in the 1970s. His first major discovery was a grand Roman villa estate near Northampton, and he also an Anglo-Saxon cemetery. Embodies, said local archaeologist Stephen Young, the best of what it means to be a metal detectorist and an archaeological enthusiast. So, following one of his finds, it attracted international attention, the Whitehall farm of a Roman villa estate. The extensive complex, dating to the 3rd or to the late 4th centuries, included 2 bathhouses complete with tessellated mosaic floors and 2 2nd century roundhouses. So this gentleman was detecting, and he found some pottery and some Roman coins, and he said to the farmer, you have a Roman site here. And so then it was permission was given for a full excavation to take place. And this is a historic recreation of what the area looked like. Interestingly, this survived after the Roman basically had departed, or no longer had governance in England, and it continued for quite a while before it was either abandoned or destroyed. But quite a substantial set of buildings, as you can see from this recreation. Yeah, a rare example of late villa occupation in use until the mid-5th century. Quite fascinating, really. There are metal detectorist things you can go on. I've just picked these randomly. Norfolk Metal Detecting Tours. Here's another one. I don't know how they go, but if you're a tourist and you want to do it, then a quick way is to join one of these tours. And they do the same for mudlarking. So, unfortunately, there is, of course, some unethical use of metal detecting. There are these people called nighthawks that sort of come and raid or detect on landowners, on land at night in particular. And the police try to catch them, and there have been a number of cases where they have been caught and fined, but that does go on as well. So I mentioned earlier the Detectorist comedy series. I don't know whether people watching have seen this series, but I enjoyed watching it. It's really partly about the lives of the two men and their loves and, disappointments in life. But metal detecting is at the centre. They're great enthusiasts for metal detecting, and it also has a very sort of positive sort of vibe to it, which is nice. It ran for 3 series. It follows the members of the fictional Danebury Metal Detecting Club in the fictional town of Danebury in North Essex. So I'm just going to run the trailer on that now.
Saw you in the field earlier. Sorry to interrupt, but are you metal detectors?
This is a metal detector. We are metal detectorists.
Wow, outrageous. Do you guys belong to a club?
Welcome, Sophie. You are very welcome.
We hear some interesting artefacts were found on Bishop's farm.
They look a bit like the folk duo, Simon and Garfunkel. Do you mind if we had a little look around?
Not at all.
This time next year, we're gonna be millionaires.
Stay out of the paddock on Birchwood Road. Don't go digging down there.
What is under there that he doesn't want people digging up? Huh?
What about you, Andy? Have you got one?
Me, no, I'm not married.
You're the only one for me, Bex.
Used to be me and Andy, right? This was our escape from the rude world. And you come along and throw a shoe in the works.
Hello.
Hi. Hi, Becky.
You no longer have permission to detect on this land under the Ancient Monuments and Archaeological Areas Act of 1979.
Sound like a dickhead.
Come on.
You're all metal detectors.
Detectorists.
So we'll move on to mudlarking. Mudlarking is the act of searching the tidal banks of rivers, most famously the River Thames, looking for lost items and objects. Not always the most beautiful setting, as you can see, but this is a source of great fascination to these hobbyists. It actually began at a time of the Industrial Revolution, when people who were in great poverty searched the river to find anything that they could sell, and they became known as mudlarks. Today it's a hobby, and they're amazing the way the river sort of churns up. The tide changes twice a day and churns up all sorts of objects from different eras in the life of London and the Thames. The river gathers anything it's given, rubbish, tributes of lost jewellery, and over time it becomes an incredibly important archaeological site. Lara Marklam has written a book called Mudlarkers, which I have a copy of, and it was a very, very well written book, really easy to read, and very informative. So we're going to just watch a documentary.
Contained in the foreshore.
As I mentioned, the London Museum has this exhibition. I'm not sure if it's a standing exhibition or whether it was a one-off. Hopefully it's a standing exhibition. This is an article written by Lara Marklam talking about her experiences as a mudlarker. So I'll just let you read that. If you want to pause it, you can read through it. But I was a bit shocked when I read that one day when she was mudlarking, she came across the body of a young man in the Thames, which would have put me off mudlarking forever. But she continued on, and she talked about the realities of living in a big city and the things that you find. But yeah, that was quite shocking. Interesting, she talks here about love tokens, which were a big thing in the 17th century. And another very common find, I think, is clay pipes, tobacco pipes, from about the 16th and 17th century. They're very, very commonly found. Some major finds in mudlarking are prehistoric finds, flint hand axe, and the 5,500-year-old skull of a Neolithic man. Some Roman treasures you can see pictured here. A highly ornate red slip ceramic oil lamp depicting a running lion. Some medieval and Tudor artefacts have been found, including, I didn't see this one, purse-shaped badge. You can read that one for yourself. And weaponry, a 16th century rapier sword. This is amazing, a 400-year-old sundial, two halves of a rare ivory sundial, found 8 years apart by two different mudlarks. Wow. There's an issue about it being loved to death, and there's an article written about that here from National Geographic. Talks a bit about some of the issues, and apparently there's a very long waiting list for people wanting to get the licenses, because for mudlarking you do need a license. You can do mudlarking tours, however, for those of you who are interested. So you go down at low tide and you walk around. You've got to have lots of personal protective equipment, big boots, very thick gloves, and a number of other things. They often use a trowel or something to sort of help dig around. And then this is one of the field liaison officers, one of the appointed officials who looks after these finds, who then is the go-between between the public and the decision-making around whether this is considered treasure or not. There is some mudlarking in other parts of the UK. The River Medway is quite well known, and the River Ouse as well. Ouse, I should say. So that's it. I hope you enjoyed watching this. This is a quick summary of the presentation made at the WEA, and I hope you enjoyed it. Here's some more information about mudlarking, some general references. End of the session. This is also something that was found during mudlarking. An extraordinary pocket watch, quite intricate and detailed, a 17th century pocket watch depicting Cupid, which is now in the British Museum.